Speaking from his prison island, Abdullah Öcalan, founder of the Kurdish militant group the PKK, addressed his fighters in early July. We're talking about a historical and decisive process, the general process of voluntarily laying down arms and the work of a comprehensive commission, which is considered to be established by law in the Turkish Grand National Assembly, is important. The war that has raged between the PKK and the Turkish state since 1984 turned a significant corner at the start of July. In a symbolic ceremony in Sulaimaniyah, Iraq, PKK fighters, one by one, removed their arms, laid them down and burned them. Speaking at the ceremony, Bese Hozat, co-president of the PKK, underscored the significance of this moment. And from now on, we are destroying our weapons of our own free will in your presence, with the aim of carrying out our struggle for freedom, democracy and socialism through democratic politics and legal methods, and based on the enactment of democratic integration laws. While in the Turkish capital of Ankara, President Erdogan hailed the ceasefire. As of yesterday, the 47-year-old scourge of terror has hopefully entered the process of coming to an end. As of yesterday, Turkey has started to close a long, painful, agonizing chapter filled with tears. And he was also defiant in victory. Turkey has won. My people has won. Turks, Kurds, Arab, each of our 86 million citizens has won. On August 5th, action followed the symbolic gestures, with the start of a parliamentary commission to address the demands of the Kurdish people. Numan Kurtulmuş, Speaker of the Turkish Parliament, addressed the members at its opening. Our commission reflects a renewed willingness to look at an issue that has consumed our country's energy for decades, a matter provoked by those who seek to alienate brother from brother. Our primary concern here, undoubtedly, is not to write a constitution, implement legal reform, or resolve all issues at once. It is to remind us that Parliament, in addition to being the voice of the people, is also the bearer of social peace, the guarantor of brotherhood, and the legitimate source of solutions. This week, why has a ceasefire been called now? Can Turkey's Kurdish population secure the rights they have longed for? Or is this a cynical ploy by President Erdogan to tighten his grip on power? My name is Hugo Goodridge, and you're listening to The New Arab Voice. The Kurdistan's Workers' Party, or PKK, began their war against Turkey in 1984. Originally formed as a leftist party and part of the global communist revolution, its focus shifted in the 90s to demand equal rights and Kurdish autonomy within the Turkish state. In 1995, Öcalan declared, "We are not insisting on a separate state under any condition. What we are calling for, very openly, is a state model where people's basic economic, cultural, social and political rights are guaranteed." It is worth pointing out that the fight for Kurdish independence and rights did not start with the PKK. Kurdish-led uprisings have occurred in one form or another since at least 1914 and ramped up with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire after the First World War. During these uprisings and rebellions, there have been terrible losses of life. Since the conflict between the PKK and the Turkish state started in 1984, over 35,000 people have been killed. There have been previous ceasefire efforts and periods of calm. A ceasefire was called between 1999 and 2004, and again between 2013 and 2015. And now, a fresh attempt. But why?
So I think this is not the first time Öcalan is talking about giving up the arms. I mean, if you look at Öcalan's statements, he's in a way prioritizing a political solution rather than a military conflict to this problem goes back way to early 1990s. So even before he was captured by the Turkish state.
This is Salim Shevik, a visiting fellow at the Centre for Applied Turkey Studies at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs.
He made several statements that he's ready to give up the arms whenever political conditions are ripe and whenever the state is ready for a political negotiation.
As mentioned, this is not the first ceasefire we've had, and it's not the first time Öcalan's PKK have sought talks. There is a difference this time round.
They had concluded a while ago that the arms struggle was done. They were cornered in the Kandil mountain range in Iraq. They have very limited operational capability in Turkey.
This is Henri Baki, Senior Adjunct Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and Emeritus Professor of International Relations at Lehigh University.
The arms struggle, as one would call it, is not an arms struggle. You can do an operation here, an operation there, but that's not going to change the Turkish state. On the contrary. So the arms struggle had come to its natural end a very long time ago.
For years now, the PKK has been unable to present any genuine military resistance to the Turkish state. Their fighters have been pushed into the Kandil mountains in northern Iraq and pounded from the sky by Turkish drones and warplanes. The PKK can still conduct some operations. Most recently, in October 2024, they carried out a gun and bomb attack on the buildings of Turkish aerospace industries, killing 7. In 2023, the PKK carried out a suicide attack outside the Ministry of Interior Affairs in the capital of Ankara, killing 3. It wasn't the first time that the PKK has used suicide attacks. It's a tactic that they've deployed since the mid-90s. Typically, the PKK has targeted military figures and buildings or police officers and police stations, although civilians have also been killed and injured. Some of these attacks have hit at the heart of the Turkish state and sent fractures through the visage of safety and security that the state likes to project. But they have also achieved little when it comes to securing the goals of the PKK. Salim Shevik again.
I think the real answer is that's the time when government is ready to negotiate. Because in the previous times, whenever government has initiated a negotiation process or offered a negotiation, PKK never refused. It always complied. It's not because the Kurdish side is more magnanimous, more peace-loving or etc. It's because of the asymmetry of the forces. I mean, obviously the state and the army is way much more powerful than the PKK. So no one in the PKK with sane mind can dream about defeating the army. So the strategic objective has already been, and has for quite some decades has been, to push the state to a negotiation table by using military ways. Like the use of violence, the end goal is to push the state to the negotiation. So whenever state says, okay, let's talk, it's illogical for the Kurdish side to say, no, I'm not talking, I will go and fight and I will defeat you.
Why are the Kurds ready to talk now? It's fair to say that they've always been ready. They know now today that they cannot defeat the Turkish state on the battlefield. And they've known this for many years.
Since then, the military power balance has tilted more in favor of the state than the PKK. The state has successfully pushed the PKK out of Turkish borders. Now most of the fighting takes place in Iraqi territory, not in Turkish territory. PKK has showed its capability to strike inside Turkey on occasion, so it can still hurt Turkish public. But there is a general understanding that there isn't much way to go by military fighting. I mean, the Kurdish side will not get a more suitable negotiation conditions by continuing the military fighting. Like they can't risk the state's arm to a better terms. Like militarily speaking, things will, at least in the foreseeable future, will never be at a better position for PKK. It's going actually in the worst direction.
By entering into talks, the Kurds are also likely hoping that it will ease the lives of Turkish Kurds living in Turkey.
Or the continuation of the armed struggle also provided the wherewithal for the Turkish state and Erdogan to suppress people. I mean, all you have to do is say, this person has connections with terrorism or terrorist organization, and it's enough to put you in prison in jail until you see a judge, and they'll deliberately give you 6 months, 9 months before you see a judge, right? Once you get arrested.
The longer the war between the PKK and the Turkish state has persisted, the greater the levels of repression have become. Association, real or imagined, is enough to see you handed a very heavy sentence.
So, in a way, by saying the armed struggle is over, we're going to do politics, takes away from the Turkish state this very important tool it has. Second, of course, it changes the atmosphere in Turkey in terms of the Kurds. Many Kurds are integrated. I mean, it's not that they want to separate from Turkey. They understand they're not going to separate. But on the other hand, they also want to live a normal life, and they don't want to be under the pressure of the state and have their people, their children arrested and so on and so forth.
The ceasefire has seen recent movements, with both the ceremonial burning of arms and the start of the commission in the Turkish Parliament. But it didn't start there. The ceasefire was called for by PKK founder and leader Abdullah Öcalan in a letter released in February of this year. It said similar things to what we've heard before from the Kurdish leader in terms of a ceasefire and political reforms, but it also went further than before.
In the February letter, the call was directed only to the PKK. There was only an appendix to the letter, we could say. I mean, those who carried the letter said that Öcalan in a separate statement, but not part of the letter. And I think this was by design in that way, that he also said that all these calls would make sense under a context of political reforms, further democratization and rule of law. And that's obvious, he said. But it wasn't inside the letter. And I think this was negotiated by the state. So this is more geared to the optics. The Kurdish side not wants to make the image that they defeated the Turkish state, because by experience from the previous negotiation processes, they know that such an image, in a way, by itself becomes a big obstacle on the peace process. Because if the idea that state is defeated or forced to the negotiation table, this image creates backlash from the Turkish public. So it was very careful not to give that image.
The notion that the Kurds were not seeking or declaring victory over the Turkish state was probably a sensible move on their part. Yes, they are talking to the Turkish state, but in Turkey today, the state is one man, President Erdogan. A man who sees himself and wants to be seen as a strongman leader. Playing to his ego, not a bad idea, particularly given Erdogan's precarious future in Turkish politics.
Öcalan made previous calls for PKK to lay down its arms or leave Turkish territory and etc. But PKK never responded unequivocally yes. The burning of the arms was a more symbolic thing, of course. I mean, it's only 30 militants burned up their arms, but in terms of its consequences, it's the letter who made the biggest consequential impact. I mean, we are at the furthest period compared to the previous periods. And I think it is what makes this unique is, okay, there is maybe more commitment from the Kurdish side, but I think a more unique aspect of this is that there is no objection from the Turkish side, politically speaking.
The February letter was a big moment in the process. It was the first big Kurdish move in the ceasefire efforts. But it wasn't the first overall move in the ceasefire efforts. That came in a statement by one of the last people you'd expect.
It actually started with Devlet Bahçeli, Erdogan's junior partner in government, his calls to Öcalan and the PKK to talk in October 2024.
If you're not a keen watcher of Turkish politics, then the name Devlet Bahçeli, leader of the MHP party, might not be familiar to you. Henri Barquet explains.
Devlet Bahçeli is a nationalist leader who for many, many years was all he wanted to do was for the Turkish state to kill as many Kurds as possible, as quickly as possible. Kurds don't exist. By definition, they do not exist. This is a nationalist party. I mean, this is the most right-wing party in Turkey, and from a, not religious, but from a nationalist perspective. And he is the one who started this. This process has started. It's because he, on October 1st, suddenly announced that Turkey needs peace and he would welcome Öcalan.
This change of heart by Bahçeli was as bizarre as it was unexpected. As an indicator of how much of a change in position this is, in 2004, Turkey abolished the death penalty. The change in law saw Öcalan's death sentence commuted. For many years, Bahçeli campaigned to have the death penalty reinstated just so Öcalan could be, quote-unquote, properly sentenced.
This is like Marine Le Pen saying she wants more immigration. I mean, really, a 180-degree turn.
For a man who leads the ultra-nationalist MHP party and who was so committed to fighting the PKK and seeing them and the Kurdish population eliminated, this is an extraordinary about-turn. But why the change of heart?
One explanation is that this guy's been in Turkish politics for probably 60 years, since he was 17 or 18. What does he have to show for? He never became the prime minister. He never became the president. He's been member of, he's a second coalition party member, but he's just a politician. History books would not be kind to him. And he essentially has started a process that will, and especially if it's successful, people will remember him as someone who brought peace to Turkey. How many politicians can you think of who can say this? I mean, he changed Turkey. He opened the door in such a way because everybody was always afraid, what will the nationalists say? The nationalists will block this. Nationalists will do that. He opened the door wide. And he even said the other day, which is shocking, something that he said, well, maybe there should be a Turkish president and a Alawite vice president and a Kurdish vice president. Change the constitution in that sense.
At 77, it's possible that Bahçeli is looking to his legacy. Another possibility is that he has a conspiratorial mindset. He sees enemies everywhere. It's not an uncommon mindset for people on the radical wings of politics.
It is quite possible that they feel that the Middle East has changed. In some ways, maybe he was vindicated in terms of but it is also conspiratorial that the world is changing, the region is changing. If they don't defend their home territory, they don't make peace with their own minorities, then the others, will take advantage of it. And you see this already in the Turkish press non-stop. And Öcalan also hints that there are powers, unnamed powers, that are trying to stop this process because they want to divide Turkey. So unnamed powers are, of course, the Israelis, right? And then maybe the Iranians and the Americans.
These notions of shadowy forces trying to change Turkey would fall into the category of conspiracy theory. As of yet, no concrete proof of these ideas has been presented, but even a conspiracy theory can have positive, if unintended, consequences. Another surprising aspect of Bahçeli's position, he started making these comments about a possible deal with the Kurds in early October. At the end of October, the PKK launched an attack on Turkish aerospace industries, killing 7. And Bahçeli didn't change his position. For President Erdogan and his ruling AKP party, Bahçeli's calls were ideal for them. If they worked, Erdogan could take most, if not all, of the credit. And if they failed, then they could lay the blame at either Bahçeli or the PKK. And for the moment, they are working. The commission has begun. The PKK's demands have changed over time. So what will they be hoping for this time round?
There is a lot of worry, even those who support this, like, okay, but I mean, what are the terms of the negotiation, and what is how a deal would look like? And it also goes back to the motives of the parties, right? We've talked a lot about the motives of the Kurdish side, that they always wanted to negotiation. But I mean, I've recently talked with representatives of the Kurdish political movement, and I kind of pressured them to understand what they want to gain from the negotiation table. I mean, of course, I mean, there other than general like peace, democracy, rule of law, which by itself would be a big gain, by the way. I mean, if Turkey applies, no need for a constitutional change or no need for new legal arrangements. I mean, the current legal laws are applied fairly, rule of law is established. This by itself is a big gain, both for the Kurds and for the larger Turkish public. But beyond that, what is the Kurdish expectation, for instance, when it comes to the recognition of Kurdish identity, Kurdish language instruction? And on these terms, Kurdish side is very opaque, and they say they are open to negotiation, and they don't make much clear red lines, so we don't know that.
Turkey is in an odd spot here. It has begun talks with the PKK, shown a willingness to engage in discussions about the ceasefire. But Turkey's problem is more fundamental than its war with the PKK.
One narrative has been that the Kurdish problem is an issue of democratization. So in order to solve the Kurdish question, we need further democratization. And for further democratization, what's the biggest obstacle in Turkey about democratization? It's Erdogan. So we have to get rid of Erdogan. Once we get rid of Erdogan, a more democratic person replaces him in the presidency, or back to the parliamentary system where some rule of law, checks and balances, a more democratic Turkey by itself will bring solution to our demands and Kurdish question.
Under Erdogan's rule, Turkey has become increasingly authoritarian. A country of one-man rule, where repression is writ large and opposition is stifled or silenced. It is a reality that Henri Baki knows all too well.
Listen, I have an indictment against me. I mean, in Turkey, I organized a 2016 coup, according to them. You know, you read my indictment. I mean, it's funny. It's a humorous piece, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. They can do whatever they want, right? I mean, they can indict a ham sandwich if they want to.
If Turkey could find its way back to democracy, then Turkey's Kurds could find themselves in a country where their culture, language and rights are protected and respected, without the need for great and sweeping constitutional changes. The recently formed commission was made up of a number of political parties. Among them were the opposition CHP, not a Kurdish party, but a political party that is in opposition to the ruling AKP party of Erdogan. The CHP only joined the commission on the condition that it addresses democratization steps. There is another option.
The second approach is, okay, I mean, democracy is nice and good and etc., but what matters for us is Kurdish rights, recognition of Kurdish rights. This doesn't necessarily mean democratization by itself. I mean, ethnic rights, ethnic recognition, right to rule in our municipalities, some local autonomies. I mean, the extent of it can be debated, but like end of hostilities towards Kurdish presence in the public, Kurdish identity itself. This can also be gained without democratization. And there are autocratic regimes where ethnic identities are recognized. I mean, just comes to my mind, on the other side of the border, Iran is not really a democracy, but Kurds there have some ethnic recognition and rights. So instead of seeing this issue as merely a democratization issue, there is a narrative which says, maybe we should bargain and get whatever we can get for the Kurdish rights and Kurdish identity and recognition of this.
The Kurds could accept the Turkey that Erdogan has created, get the rights and protections they've sought for so many years, and also bend the knee to Erdogan, their new benevolent protector.
So if everything moves smoothly and this process reaches to a successful conclusion, I think it will be good for certain Kurds, I mean, for the Kurdish rights, but overall Turkish public and overall Turkish democratization, I think it will have a very dark side. It will be a hegemonic authoritarian regime where Kurds are treated more nicely, their rights are recognized in some way, but the hope for Turkey to return back to a more somewhat democratic system would be even more less compared to the start of the peace process. And if you say, would Kurds agree to this overall, like wholeheartedly, it's difficult to say from now on. I mean, there will be certain defections, certain people who would say no. I mean, okay, of course we are for peace, but we will never vote for Erdogan. We will never support him. I don't know how large that constituency would be. At the moment, public poll says that the majority of DEM supporters, Kurdish party supporters, say that they will never vote for Erdogan. This might be true. I mean, but this is the sentiment of today. If the peace process moves forward, that sentiment might, of course, change.
The ceasefire talks in the Commission has the potential to split the Kurds. On the one side, you have Öcalan and the PKK.
I do think that Öcalan himself has come to the conclusion that he's not going to get out of jail. So he's not seeking that. He looks for better conditions and for people to come and pay respects and kiss his hand and whatever. But he wants to be able to say that he gave rise to a new Turkish state that recognizes the Kurds, that his fight, right, since 1984 was produce something, right? I mean, he's thinking about history books in many respects. He doesn't want to die as a terrorist who was caught. He wants to die as somebody, right? So this is very, very important to him.
And on the other side, you have the People's Equality and Democracy Party, or the DEM Party. They are a pro-Kurdish party. At the 2023 parliamentary elections, they won 57 seats, making them the third largest party in parliament, although a fair way back from the second place opposition CHP party, who got 169, and Erdogan's AKP party, who got the majority of 268.
But the DEM party is genuinely democratic. So their approach has been, and what they have said, they haven't said we want language rights, we want this, we want that. They have said we want democracy. We want Turkish citizens, whether in Diyarbakir or Istanbul, to do what they want. If they want to teach their kids Kurdish, let them teach Kurdish. They want to teach their kids French, let them teach French, right? So, make Turkey really democratic, which I think is the right message in principle, but you're dealing with Erdogan here, right? The least democratic person in Turkey.
For the time being, we can only really guess at what the demands and red lines for the Kurds will be in the talks. What about the Turkish government? Are their motivations any clearer?
On the government's motivations and expectations, that's even more bleak, more unclear, both for me and I guess for the larger public. So Erdogan must have some domestic political calculations, some form of support from the Kurds for his own political projects. So this is one reason, again, why this might have collapsed. So by moving the ball to the other side, the Kurdish side, by symbolically burning arms, they are basically saying, okay, let's see your cards. I mean, what do you expect from us? What is your political agenda here? What is your domestic political expectations? So that's the biggest problem, I think, here is we don't know what Erdogan is expecting from us. I mean, I have my own scenarios, but it's not publicly available. He never made it openly like I am expecting. For me, he's expecting support from the Kurds for his political projects, but he never come that clearly. So the ball is now on the government side, but we don't know how the government will react. And if the government doesn't react positively, it might be like the release of some certain political prisoners. Then I don't think the Kurdish side will take any further steps because there's lack of trust. So it should be like steps, one step from here, the other step from other side, another step from this side, another step from that side. That should be the way things will move forward. At this very moment, the ball is on the government's yard.
For Henri, the ceasefire talks are a sign that Erdogan is desperate.
Erdogan is sophisticated enough. I mean, he's been in power for this time, a long time, and so he now understands. I don't think he thinks that, the Dem party is going to change and support him in the next elections or whatever. He's thinking that there will be a positive change in society, that positive change will create a new atmosphere in which he doesn't need all of the Dem party to support him. He needs a significant number of people to say, look, he's achieved something we have not succeeded in having all these years. But at the same time, I should say that Erdogan is doing this not because he believes in the process or he believes in principle in this, it's because he's desperate. Right? I mean, he's desperate, but he's also coming up with, he's looking for a solution that hitherto he never, I should say, looked positively upon. I mean, until now, what has his policy been? Repression, repression, repression. The fact that you didn't shave this morning is enough for you to decide, you're trying to pretend that you're a terrorist and therefore you go to jail. I mean, anything can be used against you. I mean, and Turkish jails are full, tens of thousands of people.
Erdogan won the 2024 presidential election. He did win, but also the opposition lost. Erdogan was not popular in the country. The economy was in a poor state. There was intense backlash to the response to the 2023 earthquakes and a host of other problems that left voters unsatisfied. The opposition candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who led a coalition of parties, was considered by many to be less than inspiring. Since the 2024 elections, Erdogan's popularity has not increased, but he is reported to have desires to run again, despite his public denials. These reports looked more convincing when Erdogan's biggest rival and frontrunner to be Turkey's next president, Ekrem İmamoğlu, was arrested in March of this year. His university diplomas were then invalidated, effectively barring him from running for president. Constitutionally speaking, Erdogan is not allowed to run again. It is suspected, although not proven, that Erdogan could be looking for ways to change the constitution. But currently, his power or popularity do not permit him to do this alone. He would need support from beyond his traditional base. Support which he could be seeking from the Kurds. Salim Shevek.
Conservative Kurds have been voting for Erdogan for quite in early days of AK Party. But as Erdogan made an alliance with Turkish nationalists and became kind of an anti-Kurdish hawk, he lost those support. He might gain them back. I mean, he might not gain the more Kurdish nationalist votes, but the conservative Kurds who was actually more inclined towards supporting Erdogan, but are no longer supporting him because of his anti-Kurdish policies, might go back. That's number one political game could be. Number two could be that, Kurds might not support Erdogan, but they might not be part of the opposition as Demirtas has located them throughout the last decade. Like, Kurds are the most reliable element of the opposition. They might become neutral, and this by itself is a big gain for Erdogan and a big loss for Turkish opposition. So we don't know this yet, and this could by itself be enough for Erdogan, and larger Kurdish public might be ready for a more neutral position. As I said, they can ask, why are we to fight for Turkish democracy all the time? Why are we to fight at the forefront? I mean, we sacrificed enough. If the Turkish opposition can defeat Erdogan, fine, of course, why not? I mean, a more democratic Turkey, why not? But it's no longer our duty to fight for it on the forefront, could be the position.
The next presidential election isn't until 2028. Erdogan has time to make changes, if he wants to, and if he can find a way. It is likely that whatever strategy he chooses to make another run at the presidency, he will either need the Kurds with him or out of his way. For the Kurds, they should be relatively happy with where they are now. The ceasefire, the commission, the softening of far-right ultra-nationalist leaders all represent a chance for them to secure their rights. but they know, as well as anyone, that they must tread carefully. Final words to Honorary Baki.
The Kurds are very conscious of the difficulty that's in front of them, because one possible outcome of this is that, just like back in 2013, 2014, the process will come to an end and a massive wave of repression will hit the country, because Erdogan will say, national emergency, we tried to have a deal with the Kurds and they knifed us in the back, and so on and so forth.
This episode of The New Arab Voice was written and produced by me, Hugo Goodridge. Our theme music was by Omar El-Fil. The New Arab Voice will be back with a new episode shortly. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified when a new episode drops. You can find the link in the show notes. Until then, you can find all our previous episodes on all major podcast platforms. You can also check out our social media accounts on Instagram and X, both at TNA Podcasts, for additional content. And you can email us, podcast@newarab.com. That's podcast@newarab.com. You can subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and you can also rate and review, which helps us spread the word. Don't forget to follow The New Arab on Facebook, X and Instagram for all the latest news, analysis and opinion from the region.